Today I want to get into this conflict that's brewing between Elon Musk and the Brazil judiciary. So this is definitely a crazy situation with an American billionaire and tech founder facing off against a far left judicial regime under Lula that's increasingly suppressing speech they don't like. And as I pointed out in my last video on Brazil, the Brazilian judiciary is handing out really heavy sentences to Bolsonaro supporters and those who protested the inauguration of Lula. So I want to look at the law involved here and what the legal precedent says and how this is likely to pan out.
So I want to start by looking at the official Pravda version on CNN. The article from several days ago is entitled, "We Have Reached the Limit. Clash with Elon Musk Prompts Calls for Social Media Controls in Brazil." It's written by Hannah Ziadi and Duarte Mendonça. Okay, so it reads, Brazil's Attorney General has called for social media platforms in the country to be regulated after Elon Musk threatened to disobey a court order banning certain accounts on X and lashed out against, quote, aggressive censorship, unquote. In a post on X Sunday, Attorney General Jorge Messias wrote, "It is urgent to regulate social networks. We cannot live in a society in which billionaires domiciled abroad have control of social networks and put themselves in a position to violate the rule of law, failing to comply with court orders and threatening our authorities." In a statement, Brazil's Supreme Court described Musk's defiance as a, quote, flagrant, unquote, obstruction of justice and said he should be investigated by the police. Supreme Court Justice Alexandre de Moraes announced Sunday that he would open an inquiry into the billionaire businessman who owns X. The standoff is the latest clash between authorities around the world and Musk, a self-declared free speech absolutist who has relaxed X's content moderation policies and reinstated a number of previously blocked accounts after buying the company, formerly known as Twitter, in 2022. Orlando Silva, a Brazilian lawmaker aligned with the country's left-wing government, said he would propose a, quote, responsibilities regime for these digital platforms, unquote. "We have reached the limit," he posted on X, adding that Musk had disrespected the judiciary. On Saturday, X's global government affairs team posted that it had been, quote, forced by court decisions to block certain popular accounts in Brazil and threatened with, quote, daily fines if they engaged in noncompliance. "We do not know which posts are alleged to violate the law. We are prohibited from saying which court or judge issued the order or on what grounds," they wrote. "They do not believe the orders are constitutional and will challenge them legally where possible," they added. The Supreme Court had ordered that the accounts be blocked as part of its ongoing investigation into so-called, quote, digital militias, unquote, which, among other things, is looking into the spread of misinformation and incitement of crime under the government of former far-right President Jair Bolsonaro. Social media platforms have been widely viewed as a catalyst for riots in Brazil that took place on January 8th last year, when hundreds of protesters broke into federal government buildings in the capital, Brasilia, in scenes reminiscent of the January 6th, 2021 insurrection in the United States. Musk suggested that Moraes was behind the ban, writing Sunday on X that the judge has, quote, brazenly and repeatedly betrayed the Constitution and people of Brazil. He should resign or be impeached. In a separate post Saturday, he called the court's decision to block the accounts, quote, aggressive censorship that, quote, appears to violate the law and the will of the people of Brazil. He said X will defy the court's order and lift all restrictions on accounts in Brazil. Quote, as a result, we will probably lose all revenue in Brazil and have to shut down our office there. But principles matter more than profit, unquote, Musk noted. X has faced criticism for accommodating government censorship demands in the past, with Musk saying the company has no choice but to comply. For example, it blocked some X accounts in Turkey at the behest of the government ahead of the country's elections last year, while at the same time contesting the orders in court. So there is the official Pravda version from the main news wires, essentially from the main promoted narrative on the story. This was followed up a day later, yesterday, by Brazil's President Lula, throwing some shade at Elon on the climate crisis and implying that he's part of the problem in global climate change. He was speaking at a launch for deforestation mission to stop deforestation and forest fires in the Amazon, and he referred to, quote, billionaires trying to build a rocket to find something in space, unquote, and saying that Musk is part of the problem indirectly. This is in light of the things that are going on with Brazil's Supreme Court versus Musk. And Brazil's Supreme Court, headed by Alexandre de Moraes, is very close with Lula And Musk is quite aware of this, noting by calling out Alexandre by name on Twitter and saying, how did he become the dictator of Brazil? He has Lula on a leash. The specific starting incident in this flare-up between Musk and the Brazilian judiciary came a week ago when U.S. journalist Michael Schellenberger said that Moraes is leading a sweeping crackdown on free speech. And this was something Schellenberger put out based on the Twitter files, which were released in 2022 after Musk bought Twitter. In those files, Schellenberger pointed out recently that Moraes was trying to have an ongoing campaign of censoring sitting members of Brazil's Congress, and that Moraes was trying to weaponize Twitter's content moderation policies against supporters of Bolsonaro at the time. It's worth noting that Bolsonaro narrowly lost the 2022 elections to Lula. So there are questions about how that could have affected the election. And Schellenberger's recent mentions of that set this off once again. Moraes is the head of Brazil's Superior Election Tribunal, or STF in Portuguese, and he put in 100,000 reals fine, about $20,000 a day, for any account reactivated by X that Brazil's judiciary has deemed to be bannable. That fine has not been put in yet on the blocked accounts. But some examples of people that are being blocked include former Brazilian Congressman Daniel Silveira, who got 9 years in jail in 2022 for being charged with trying to allegedly lead a movement to overthrow the Supreme Court. Moraes has specifically accused Musk of criminal instrumentalization of X and is leading an investigation of him within Brazil. And he is also tacking Musk onto that so-called digital militias probe, which is saying that Bolsonaro and those close to him intentionally spread an disinformation campaign during his presidency, including on X. Now, the response of Musk saying that he'll be lifting all the restrictions on X and that he won't back down, even though the judiciary has supposedly threatened to arrest ex-employees, is definitely in line with Musk's general behavior. At this point, we don't really know what exact ex-workers would be at risk in Brazil or what they could be charged with or outside Brazil. The themes, the memes, and mockery of Moraes have depicted him as Voldemort from Harry Potter, and basically this idea that he is this liberal kind of bogeyman. And Musk is now promising to do a full data dump, as he calls it, which he says will specify which accounts the Brazilian judiciary wants him to ban. And he says that data dump will be done once X gets all Brazilian employees to a, quote, safe place. It's worth noting that even journalists like Glenn Greenwald, who lives in Brazil and has been fairly critical of Bolsonaro and Brazil's right, still has noted that Moraes has almost, quote, unilateral unchecked power to essentially order anyone to be banned from the internet that he wants. This doesn't just come down to conservative people. He's permanently silenced 10 members of Congress and also exerted effective pressure on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and every major platform to get rid of these people who essentially he accused of various things and simply had them removed. Now, Elon Musk obviously has a checkered record, and he's not necessarily this idealistic figure even on free speech. He did cave in to the Turkish government and the Indian government, and he's banned accounts for them. So what exactly is the tipping point for him on Brazil is possibly the brazenness and also the fact that he is basically now being accused and attacked by them without much holding back, and he sees it as a challenge. It may also be that he doesn't want to keep backing down when it becomes so obvious this way, and it makes him look like a fool. Musk has called Moraes and his behavior, quote, the most draconian demands of any country on earth, and called it flagrant conduct of obstruction of Brazilian. So this case is interesting for a number of reasons. One reason is that Brazil's left-wing politicians are going to try to put through this responsibilities regulations for digital platforms. And basically, that would mean that Twitter would have more restrictions with it to operate within other countries. However, Musk is so powerful and with such a roster of Defense Department contracts and deep up into certain establishment circles that he's not easy to take down. And that's what makes it the most interesting, is that he actually does have a chance to defeat these kind of challenges and to get governments to back down. I think at this point, the chances are he will end up sort of semi backpedaling this story or getting one or two symbolic wins on an account that gets reinstated and then just leave it. But overall, even if you think Musk is disingenuous or anything else, he clearly is serving as quite an antagonist to these large neoliberal governments and leftist governments that more or less want to unilaterally decide who is allowed to say what. As much as conservatives and libertarians and moderates in Brazil are not fans of Moraes, he's a very savvy and ruthless politician, and there's very little chance he's actually going to face impeachment. If anything, his disinformation crackdown is going to accelerate, and the Brazilian Supreme Court Chief Justice Luis Roberto Barroso put out a statement Monday supporting everything Moraes said. So he's got support coming in from different corners. Brazil does have a significant free speech amount of support and more conservative parties, but the Lula government is very dominant, and they spent years reorganizing and moving in. So this is not to say that there's nothing which can be done internally, but something like what Musk is doing is probably the best chance for many of these countries to be checked on their ambitions to control speech. The irony, of course, is that in the United States and Canada, there are also significant challenges to allowing people to speak their mind on platforms like X. And although Musk has not had quite as much of a public flare up against Trudeau, for example, that kind of scenario is most likely eventually coming because these issues aren't going to go away. And a powerful nonconformist billionaire who has some access to institutional power versus powerful censorious governments is only going to accelerate. So I'm going to follow the story closely and keep you updated. But at this point, I would look for something of a gridlock and a lot of more details that will probably emerge.